Alright, here's your Unit 0 study guide review. Starting with number 1, HDI, the Human Index, Development Index, is something that they're going to use to see the efficiency and the overall health of a country. They use the health, knowledge, and standard of living to measure these things. Look at life expectancy at birth, adult literacy rates, as well as GDP per capita. A state political system that has sovereignty, political power exercised over a certain population within a territory through a set of different public institutions. A nation is a human community with shared history, culture, and or political identity. Your political regime, an example, is a system of a state, rules that state set and follows, and exerting power over a set period of time, and endure beyond individual governments or leaders. So it's the actual system and structure, not the people that are involved. Legitimacy and characteristics. It's a belief that the government has a right to rule and exercise that authority over a group of people. Different ways to gain this. Traditional ways where it determines who should rule and how they should rule just based off of past occurrences in the tradition. Charismatic leaders, different personalities of leaders can create legitimacy. Rational legal, you have a common law or also code law and constitutions create legitimacy. An authoritarian regime is a political regime where a small group of individuals exercises power over the state. Usually these are the elites who hold political power, make a lot of the decisions, some based off of communism, some based off of corporatism. In corporatism, government officials interact with all these different groups of people outside of the government to see what they say and before they set their policies. Sometimes this is known as patron-client system, where favors are given in order for their services and their support of the regime. Also, the economy is tightly controlled by the political elite, and citizens have little to no input on selection of leaders. Usually, civil liberties are restricted. For causation and correlation, causation, the idea that one variable causes another, or correlation, the correlation exists when a change in one variable accompanies a change in the other. Market economy, private ownership of property, little interference from the government. The command economy, the government owns a lot of the industrial enterprises, manages the central with central government planning. Sometimes they have 3, 5, 10-year plans. Mixed economies, having a little bit of both, where you have a lot of private ownership, but you do have some government involvement. You have independent and dependent variables. Independent variable influences the dependent variable. The dependent variable, the variable that is measured depends on action of the independent variable. We're looking at empirical and normative statements. Empirical data or statements are based on facts, numbers, and statistics. Your normative statements are based on value judgments. Comparing and contrasting power and legitimacy. The ability to direct the behavior of others through coercion, persuasion, or leadership is power. We're looking at presidential system and parliamentary system. We'll start with parliamentary system. Citizens vote for other legislative branch reps. Which then pick the leader of the executive branch from the majority party. So whatever party has the majority of people, they pick a leader out of there to be maybe the head of government, which operates the day-to-day operations. Usually in these systems, there's a head of state, but it's only a symbolic figure. This is where they have fusion of power. So the executive and legislative branches are together. A presidential system, citizens vote for legislative reps and their executive branch leaders. The president is both head of state and head of government. There's always a system of checks and balances and separation of powers. Looking at your corporatist and pluralist systems, usually you have fewer groups competing, usually one for each interest sector in a corporate system. Pluralist, you'll have more. In Corporatist, the group's monopoly over its sector is officially approved by the state and sometimes protected by the state. A pluralist system is usually found in a democratic system, while a corporatist system is found more in authoritarian regimes. Liberal democracy, also known as substantive democracies, you have competitive elections, you have civil liberties for individuals, you base off of the rule of law, there's open civil society, you have a judiciary branch which is neutral, and civilians usually control the military. An illiberal or procedural democracy is something that appears to be a liberal democracy, but they don't have many of the features above, so it looks like they have fair elections and competitive elections, but they're not. A lot of times civil liberties are restricted. Different types of systems of government, you're unitary, all the policy making powers are in one geographic location, and the central government is responsible for most policies. A federal power divided between the central government and subunits, so regional bodies. Those bodies will then have power to tax and make different laws and keep order. A confederal system, power spread among many subunits, and usually the central government is very weak. A difference between head of state and head of government. Head of state symbolizes and represents the people. May or may not have policy-making power. Often they do not. Head of government is actually in charge and running the day-to-day operations of the government. One-party system, two-party, multi-party. A party system in which one political party controls the government and votes. Voters have no option. That would be a one-party or single-party system. A party in which two main parties compete for majority control of the government. There are minority parties, but they don't really have much of a role, kind of like the United States. And then a multi-party system, several important political parties, none of which generally gain a majority of seats in the national legislature. Different representation, proportional and single-member districts, and proportional. This creates a multi-member district, so multiple people are being voted from one district. Ballots are usually cast for a party, not an individual, so you have a list, and based on how many seats the party gets, you go by the list. Percentage of votes a party gets determines the number of seats. Single-member district, or the SMD, candidates compete for a single representative seat. Voters choose one. Last couple things here, the Gini Coefficient. It's a measure. It measures the extent to which the distribution of income among individuals or households within an economy deviates from a perfectly equal distribution. So if you are close to zero, it means everyone receives exactly the same income. Or if you're close to 100% or 1, it represents that the income distribution is completely unequal, meaning one person gets all the income, everyone else does not. You want to be close to 0. And then some characteristics of bureaucracies, agencies that implement government policy. A lot of times there's a lot of red tape, meaning a lot of paperwork and hoops to jump through. They're very large organizations. You must be qualified to work within them. And usually these are non-elected positions. That is your Unit 0 study guide.